Hi everyone, this is Amreen from Read a Day Club. In today's video, I'm going to talk about many things actually, but the primary topic of discussion is going to be Iris Murdoch's The Sea, the Sea. Now, I don't know if you read the quote that I shared at the beginning of this video. Irrespective, let me read that because it sort of forms the basis of what I'm going to talk about next, and it also lays the foundation for Murdoch's philosophy. We are such inward secret creatures that inwardness is the most amazing thing about us, even more amazing than our reason. But we cannot just walk into the cavern and look around. Most of what we think we know about our minds is pseudo-knowledge. We are all such shocking posers, so good at inflating the importance of what we think we value. Okay, so Murdoch believed that we humans at our very core are self-interested beings, that we're always driven by our self-inflated ego. And that's pretty much the best way to describe the protagonist of this novel. His name's Charles Araby, a retired theatre personality who moves from the bustle of London to this house by the sea. Withdraws would be a better word than moves. So this character, this Charles Araby, he is so many things. I can't even begin to describe him. An aging celebrity who's had his share of romantic relationships, although none of them ever led to marriage, because he seemed to me to be the kind of person who simply just wanted to achieve or get something just to, sort of satisfy his self-serving desires. A highly delusional man who would always resort to these ego-inflating explanations and justifications for his actions, to the point of self-denial even. And he did all this very unintentionally, and that's the most absurd thing, right? So this Charles Araby withdraws into his life by the sea, and that's where he stumbles upon his childhood, his old flame, his first childhood love, Hartley. Now, she's a married woman, and by his standards, she's grown up to be quite unattractive and dull-looking. Now, and only after like a brief encounter with her, he comes to the most convenient conclusion that she is unhappy in her marriage and just simply miserable and wants to be rescued. So he makes it his life's mission to bring her back to him, to sort of reignite their love and strangely enough, even marry her. And this is all Charles Araby. None of it is coming from Hartley. Although at one point, throughout the book, she does mention at one point that she still loves him, that she never stopped loving him. And at the same time, she also says, where's that? Yes, I suppose I love you. I've never forgotten you. And when I saw you, I felt it all again. But it's something childish. It isn't part of the real world. There was never any place for our love in the world. If there had been, it would have won and we wouldn't have parted. It wasn't just me, it was you. You went away. You can't remember how it was. And there isn't any place for this love in the world now. It's pointless. It's irrelevant. It's a dream. We're in a dream place, and tomorrow we must leave it. You say it was fated. Perhaps it is, but not like you think. It's an evil fate. So, at this point, I would like to read this conversation that goes on between Charles and his cousin James, who I thought was quite an interesting, insightful, and even a more practical man. So anyway, James is talking to Charles and he tells him, you may be deluding yourself in thinking that you have really loved this woman all these years. What's the proof? What is love anyway? Love's all over the mountains where the beautiful go to die, no doubt, but I cannot attach much meaning to your idea of such a long-lasting love for someone you lost sight of so long ago. Perhaps it's something you've invented now. Now, this is how sad, delusional, lonely, egotistical, and even manipulative Charles Araby is. Though, of course, what follows from that is another matter. Another thought I have is that your rescue idea is pure imagination, pure fiction. I feel you cannot be serious. Do you really know what her marriage is like? You say she's unhappy. Most people are. A long marriage is very unifying, even if it's not ideal, and those old structures must be respected. You may not think much of her husband, but he may suit her, however impressed she is by meeting you again. Has she said she wants to be rescued? Right. So he sort of traps her in his house because he thinks that if she spends enough time with him, he'll be able to, knock some sense into her head and sort of convince her to leave her supposedly violent husband. But she's sitting in his room with him, and she's sitting on his bed, and that's where he keeps her locked, by the way. And she says to him, I've dog-eared that page, yeah. So she says, you don't understand people like me, like us, the other ones. You're like a bird that flies in the air, a fish that swims in the sea. You move, you look about you, you want things. There are others who live on earth and move a little and don't look. So in response to this, he's trying to manipulate her into believing that that's not her reality, But then despite that, she tells him that she wants to go home, she wants to go back to her husband, but he doesn't let her do that. I mean, eventually he does, because she doesn't cave in, she doesn't want to. I mean, why would she? Okay, so now I think I would want to explain the importance of all this, and this is where I even talk about Murdoch's philosophy. As I mentioned before, Murdoch believed that we humans at our very core are self-interested beings, that we're always driven by a self-inflated ego. So we'll come up with all sorts of self-serving reasonings just to justify why we think, behave and act a certain way. And this sort of abstract thinking can carry one away from the actual truth. Like, it can detach you from reality, and that can damage your character, your personality, your rational faculties and stuff like that. It's morally noxious to have such a distorted, self-serving view of the world and life in general. I mean, Charles Araby himself admits to himself that after creating all this unnecessary trouble and drama, that quickly I had lost control of my life and of the lives with which I was meddling. I felt dread and a terrible fatalism and bitter grief such as I had never felt in my life since Hartley had left me so many years ago. I had wakened some sleeping demon, set going some deadly machine, and what would be, would be. Okay, so Charles Araby, as is obvious, he's always thinking and acting in a way to satisfy his inward ego all the time, which is why I think he fails to see the actual value of the world outside, which is why he fails to see the actual value of Hartley's life and her beliefs and opinions. And he regards not just Hartley, but others too in his life, women, men, friends, relatives, everyone else too. Like, he sees them all through this self-serving filter. So, he came off as not just a misogynist, but also a misanthropist. But the nature of this type of character is wonderful, because it sort of paves the way for transformation, self-development and unselfing. Murdoch's unselfing, her philosophy of unselfing, is actually one of the reasons why I decided to read The Sea, and it's also why I bought her non-fiction work, Existentialists and Mystics. Now, I have yet to buy her equally insightful non-fiction book called The Sovereignty of Good. Now, I read an article on the Marginalian where they, there was an excerpt shared from that book, The Sovereignty of Good, and I liked it so much that I actually wrote it down here in this book, in The Sea. I had my sister write it down for me. So I'm going to leave the link to that article on the Marginalian in the description box. Now, let me read to you what I wrote. So Iris Murdoch says, the self, the place where we live, is a place of illusion. Goodness is connected with the attempt to see the unself, to see and to respond to the real world in the light of a virtuous consciousness. This is the non-metaphysical meaning of the idea of transcendence to which philosophers have so constantly resorted in their explanations of goodness. Goodness is a transcendent reality, means that virtue is the attempt to pierce the veil of selfish consciousness and join the world as it really is. It is an empirical fact about human nature that this attempt cannot be entirely successful. Okay, so this detachment from the self, from from the ego. Does Charles Araby experience any of that? Well, he does towards the end of the book, and because that's when he's left abandoned, lonely, and hopeless, because some of his very close friends and relatives die. So when his life reaches this stage of utter hopelessness, he begins to reconcile with the world. And to be honest, Murdoch's philosophy of unselfing instantly struck a chord with me, and because I feel like there's something so hopeful and aspirational about it. I mean, you have these limitations, and of course I'm talking about the self-imposed ones here, this sense of entitlement, these egocentric, self-serving desires. And as soon as you realize you have them, you can begin to detach yourself from them. Easier said than done, of course, I know, but it is a possibility, and that to me is very hopeful and aspirational. And it actually comes from a very personal experience, which is why I feel so strongly about it. So yeah, I mean, The Sea is a beautiful, complex, ironic novel which confronts our major demons: fear, jealousy, vanity, envy, the pain and confusion of misplaced love, the impulse to violent action, whether on the battlefield or in the privacy of the home. It is impossible to isolate any single strand in such a work. So yeah, I hope you read this book. I, for one, gobble down the sea like French fries. Yes, like hot, crispy, golden brown French fries, and yummy it was indeed. Hi again. So I have decided to share with you the 3 books that I've been wanting to read forever, but just didn't get to them in the year 2021. So it's my goal for the year of 2022 to get them checked off my TBR list. So the first one is, okay, so I'm going to go through them really quickly. So the first one is Samuel Beckett's Malone Dies and the Unnameable. Now this book is all existentialism, the destitution of man. Right now, these are 3 novels, and I'm going to devour them one after another. I mean, just look at him. He looks so gangster, Italian mafia like. So anyway, I have read Samuel Beckett's short stories, First Love and other novellas, and I have also read his play Waiting for Godot. Okay, now we'll move on to my second book. Now this one is War and Peace by, oh my god, the book smells so amazing, by Leo Tolstoy. My sister is reading this book at the moment. Okay, now I have read, my first Tolstoy read was Childhood, Boyhood, Youth, this one here, and this book I really loved. I mean, he's written about human emotions, awareness, and even transformation so well, with so much accuracy, honesty, depth, and clarity. So, and War and Peace is an even more esteemed work of his, so I just have to read it. I mean, quit putting it off, lazy bum. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what the book's about. Tolstoy's epic masterpiece intertwines the lives of private and public individuals during the time of the Napoleonic Wars and the French invasion of Russia. The fortunes of the Rostovs and the Bolkonskys, of Pierre, Natasha, and Andrei are intimately connected with the national history that is played out in parallel with their lives. Balls and soirees alternate with councils of war and the machinations of statesmen and generals, scenes of violent battles with everyday human passions in a work whose extraordinary imaginative power has never been surpassed. The prodigious cast of characters, both great and small, seem to act and move as if connected by threads of density as the novel relentlessly questions ideas of free will, fate, and providence. Yet, Tolstoy's portrayal of marital relations and scenes of domesticity is as truthful and poignant as the grand themes that underlie them. So that's a heavy read. Okay, so let's now move on to my last one, but it's the last one, but 100% and definitely not the least is E.M. Cioran's On the Heights of Despair. Now, I don't have the physical copy of this book because it's just too expensive. Why? I mean, why? So anyway, Aisha has read and reviewed his The Trouble with Being Born. I haven't read any of his works, and if you're not familiar with him, then E.M. Cioran was a Romanian philosopher who mainly wrote about decay, suffering, existentialism, nihilism, basically philosophical pessimism. As for On the Heights of Despair, that book is actually a collection of his essays where he talks about social isolation, pain, depression, and even suicide. So if you're into that sort of, I don't know, grim, chilling, and cathartic literature / philosophy, then go ahead and question your existence. I know I will. Alright, so now I quickly want to talk about an author that I have not yet read, unfortunately, and that would be Dickens. So I have Oliver Twist, Hard Times, Bleak House, A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, and David Copperfield. And I got these 4 from this website, Bookchor, at a very affordable rate, which was amazing. So anyway, my first Dickens read will be Oliver Twist, simply because I've been told that he very openly talks about the dark side of humanity in this one. Fiction, of course. Okay, so now that's enough of me. What about you? What are you reading at the moment? Any dark or difficult books that you think I should add to my TBR list? Please let me know.